Everything goes up on the second floor. There's electrical, there's plumbing, there's a waterfall. Backlit using RGB lighting controlled by a Crestron with 16.7 million different color options. Shading and lighting, video distribution. It was great to have that full ecosystem working together. The engineering that went into the project, even we were blown away by some of the collaboration that happened.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Smarter Spaces podcast. I'm your host, Michael Trezza. Today, we have a very special episode in store. Imagine you pull up to a quiet parking space to park your RV, and with the simple press of a button, it not only expands, but it also transforms into a 3-story luxury smart home on wheels. How do you pack all that cutting-edge technology and the luxury factor into something that moves, folds, and unfolds? Well, stick around to find out and come take a listen as I sit down with two of the masterminds behind the cutting-edge technology in the world's largest RV. Welcome back to the Smarter Spaces podcast. Today's guests are people who know what it takes to turn even the most unconventional spaces into those high-tech marvels. Today, I am joined by John and Cameron Gould of Gould Sound and Light, a firm known for tackling some of the most ambitious integration projects out there, from luxury homes to unique spaces. John and his team have seen it all, but their latest challenge that we're going to be talking about today might just be the most unique yet. I'd like to welcome John and Cameron to the show. John, Cameron, how you guys doing today?
Well, hello. Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Of course. I'm super excited about our conversation today. We're going to be talking about an up-and-coming project that is going to be one of Crestron's case studies. The project has already happened, but the case study has yet to be released. So hopefully we'll be able to really dive into some of the details on that today. So let's dive right into the project itself. Can you guys talk about the project scope and how you guys got involved?
So we've been in business for about 35 years, raised in the industry. As such, we have a lot of connections with supply chain, CSPs, people in the industry. And we were brought in actually by one of our CSPs. He thought that we would be a good fit for this type of scenario. We sat down with the builders of the project, the people who delivered the RV. Once we sat down at a round table, we soon figured out that there was a lot of synergy. We shared a lot of the same, work ethics. Failure is not an option. Get it done. Push the envelope. What can you do that's different from your previous projects? So we came up with some really creative, clever ideas, and they seemed to mesh with what their vision was. So after that, it was a natural fit.
Awesome. So it seems that this was your first RV integration. So was that the reason why you were interested in the project in itself? It's kind of seemed like a challenge in a unique space that you haven't tackled before, or what was the discovery process like? I know you just touched upon it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, most of the projects we work on are residential, commercial, industrial, and they certainly don't have any moving parts, the lateral movement of walls, vertical ceilings going up and down. So that was a challenge for us. And quite honestly, the biggest challenge out of the gate was, how are we going to find vendors to sell us the materials that we need that will work in a space like this, which has its mechanical pinch, vertical lift, pop out lateral characteristics. And how are we going to manage this without having long-term problems or short-term problems, even from an infrastructure and topology point of view?
Right. So how long does a project like this take? And I know you have Cameron here sitting right next to you. So how many technicians were involved as well in a project like this? Just two?
Yeah, we're a very concentrated team. We have additional resources. We were 2 techs and a programmer. And traditionally, the gestation period for a project of this scope and magnitude is 1 year. But we fast-tracked it in 6 months, so we delivered it in 6 months. That's a lot of work, Ed.
I bet, especially the fast-track component. So, John, you kind of just touched upon it a bit here with, some of the various stakeholders involved, right? Collaboration is essential when bringing these complex projects to life, right? So, for example, marine projects need to work with a shipyard per se. So what mechanical and design teams were also involved that you needed to coordinate with?
So it's no secret we were working with a company who's based in Austria called F-List. They are traditionally, their business model is they do high-end finishing for private jet and yacht. So they were great in terms of bringing us up to speed. We were worried, traditionally in a residential or commercial application, when you put wires in a wall, the wall's closed. How are you going to get access to that infrastructure if ever push comes to shove? Because of the way they put aviation projects together, every panel is weighed, it's identified, and it is removable.
Right.
So it made it very easy for us in terms of doing additions, changes, that sort of thing. And we had a long runway to work up to. And as soon as they said go, we went in and we basically wired it to the nines with spares and whatnot for the future. But they were very helpful in terms of guiding us through the process.
I bet that's such again, collaboration is so important in a scope like this, for things to go absolutely right, which is needed, obviously. So can you walk us through the vehicle or the space, let's say, briefly, and give us an overview of the technology in each space of the RV, right? So I know we have lighting, shades, HVAC. So where did you use Crestron products, and maybe why did you use some of those products in those spaces?
Well, we used Crestron about everywhere on that RV. The reason we were really pushed in the Crestron direction is, the reliability, the ease of use. Once everything's set up, everything just kind of integrates very nicely together. I mean, you guys have products in shading and lighting and video distribution. To have that full ecosystem working together, it worked very well. I can give you an example. For HVAC, we use the Horizon thermostats, which were great. A lot of the touchscreens were TSW, or all of them were TSW 1070s.
Right.
Various LED modules, shades, and Crestron. You guys brought it all together. It worked very well.
Awesome. That's always amazing to hear. So, Cameron, you just talked about a couple of control points, and obviously, Crestron accomplishes all the automation and obviously so much more in that ecosystem that you just mentioned. So, Are there any one-touch features here in the RV? Maybe some automated scenes or something like that?
So, automated scenes. I mean,
door stations. We're using door stations. So intercom, message pops up, two-way dialogue using the SIP server that is really one touch. They had intercommunications, so the owner of the coach could speak to the kids in the coach, and upstairs, downstairs, since it is a 3-story RV. And people always ask me, how did you accomplish a 3-story RV, and how is it possible? How is it, legal on the road? How does it get under underpasses? So we periodically have to go through the backstory, and then, a picture, the expression, the picture, tells 1,000 words. Once you see how this operates, it's really quite simple, but quite a marvel of engineering to wrap your head around.
I bet. I mean, sounds incredible. So we talked about some technologies, right, that you use with Crestron. Did you guys come up with any new techniques with these technologies or solutions to get this done with maybe something you haven't tried before, right? Because we know the space is so unique, right? So you come from doing a lot of smart homes where maybe that doesn't translate one-to-one when you're now doing a luxury home on wheels, essentially. Did you guys have to pivot and make any adjustments with some new techniques for this RV?
Well, when it came to space limitations, we had a lot of confined spaces to work in, which we were okay with, but we had to at times reinvent the wheel in terms of like the shade openings. A traditional shade pocket is X deep by X high by the width of the shade. We had a couple of long nights going back and forth with Crestron and shade engineering to say, well, this is how the space is designed. How can we incorporate a motor into this space and still have the tolerances that the manufacturer requires in order to reliably and consistently cycle through these, the cycle of the shades?
I'd say they use about every inch of space on that RV. So really, there was a lot of work and a lot of thought and planning into where each module would go, where each panel would go, everything down to even in the frame rails of the trailer, the length of the whole trailer, they had water tanks under the floor just for gray water, wastewater, potable water. They really used as much space as they could. So it was a lot of planning that went into it.
Yeah, definitely not your cookie cutter atmosphere there
No.
for your space type.
Anything but.
Yeah.
Right. So you guys just touched upon a little bit, right, with some of the, some of the shading challenges per se, with the space limitations, and then some other things along those lines. But were there any more challenges? I imagine there would be some challenges around maybe the slide out features of the RV, right? You're not generally dealing with a retracting space where you're worrying about damaging and crimping cable. Obviously, this is a moving structure, so there's a lot of motion and vibration as well involved, when you're driving it. So I'm sure that plays a factor as well. Can you talk about how some things like that might have presented some challenges?
Yeah, there were definitely presented a lot of challenges. One of them was just finding, cables that were suitable for the job. An example would be we needed to source these high flex Cat6a cables that were stranded core, shielded as well. That would be able to actually, move that many times. We also used a company called Igis, which makes a huge e-chain provider, which basically they make this kind of plastic chain that's able to move with the RV and kind of keep our wires all together, safe and bundled. But yeah, it was that was definitely a part of the challenge.
Yeah, shock mounting TVs, road cases, so that, if heaven forbid it takes a pothole or hits a speed bump, as inevitably things on the road will and do often. We needed to make sure that we used locking connectors on all of our RJ45s.
Yeah.
So we just looked at it from a common sense point of view. And I said, okay, what if this thing is shaken, not stirred? And, so we had to simulate that worst case scenario on a lot of our fine tuned connections. So for that end, to that end, even some of the HDMI connections on the back of TVs, we actually went to the length of hot gluing some of the connections in, because most consumer TVs don't provide a locking connector.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that we weren't getting callbacks for, silly things like that.
Right. Loose cable. Yeah, I'm sure, this is such a unique space where there's a lot of little nuances that you wouldn't generally associate with a project where you're worrying, like you mentioned, you're worrying about keeping an HDMI cable in a slot on the back of a television. Normally it's plug and play, set and forget. But this is such a unique space type where cabling and the organization of it, Cameron touched upon it in terms of, the bundling of them is super important to make sure everything is clean and organized so it doesn't move around. So that's pretty eye-opening.
We have a 3-inch umbilical cord going to the main rack, 3-inch in diameter. And we probably have 4 elements of strain relief on that one, the one umbilical cable, just to avoid any scenarios like that.
I bet. So can you guys dive into some of the total costs associated with a project like this, regarding the technology integration and the rig as a whole, because normally you go into a house and you have the cost of the house, which is obviously, the real estate component, but then you're integrating all the technology. Is it the same concept here with, the rig and the RV itself and then all the technology, or those two kind of meet in the middle, or how does that work?
I think the sticker price for the coach, when all said and done, was about $6 million US.
Wow.
Of that, in US dollars, the technology component was probably close, I'd say north of 400,000.
Okay. So you're looking $6.5 million all in.
Yeah.
Quite the project.
Quite the project, quite the gear. Again, F-List, who was the builder, did an exceptional job. Anderson Luxury Mobile Estates was the provider of the RV. We, again, tried to have as much redundancy on the project to that end.
Right.
Again, we have telemetry that enables us to communicate with the coach, whether it's in motion, whether it's permanently parked. It does have backup power when it's in its home place. It has shore power. But when it's on the road, there's a series of batteries in the belly of the beast, as we call it, underneath the coach, which will provide power to refrigerators, our network. The network is the courtesy of a company called Cradle Point, fire engine and life safety and EMT and that sort of thing.
Awesome. So, we just talked about a pretty hefty price point here, right?
Yeah.
So what's the clientele situation for a project like this? If you can tell us, are there certain clients for this project that, they would be tailored for? Musicians, motorsports stars, both seem to gravitate towards vehicles like this.
Yeah. I mean, so the company the RV company, Anderson Luxury Mobile Estates, they have a lot of clients who are, movie stars, professional sports players. I think this really has a big appeal to people who are really on the move, whether they're going from racetrack to racetrack or movie set to movie set.
Right.
There have been some trailers done in the past for Will Smith, Jamie Foxx, a lot of other big name A-list actors. Yeah. And, it makes a lot of sense in the way that, instead of staying in a generic star suite or sitting in traffic and paparazzi, going back to a hotel every day, you might as well have your home away from home in the form of a luxury mobile estate, all the creature comforts.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's dive into some more overall features of the unit here. So in regards to the actual body of the unit, is it an all-in-one RV or does it have a separate engine like a tractor trailer?
So it's more like a semi-trailer. So it gets towed by a tractor trailer. And
interesting. Okay.
Sometimes they have a generator unit on the tractor trailer which can power the RV, but most of the time on the road it's just relying on the batteries. And it's what, about 80 feet long, this RV? Yeah, it's longer than your standard tractor trailer. Obviously taller as well, but that's the form factor really.
Okay, so it's physically getting towed, so to speak,
exactly.
and then it gets set somewhere when it gets used.
Exactly, they're kind of leveling feet that go into the ground to lift it up so that it's not as it's you can actually level it wherever it is.
Right.
That's how it gets set up. Really.
Yeah, so there is a long list. If it were a paper list, it would probably be in a binder at least an inch thick of when the trailer gets parked, when the RV gets parked, there's a list, of deploying the lateral sections, 4 of which there's 4 pushouts, and then raising the roof and then raising the observation platform on top. But before you can put the key in the tractor trailer and pull this thing away, there is a long checklist, a safety checklist of things that have to be signed off on, or the driver has to make sure that all these safety mechanisms are in place before the roof comes down, before the slide outs come back in.
A nice thing we could do with Crestron was we had a kind of, back to kind of one-touch features. We had kind of a shutdown sequence for the RV that we created within Crestron so that the driver, or the person operating it, moving it from place to place, can go to one of the TSWs and press kind of a trailer shutdown button that will raise all the shades, that'll prepare it for transport, it'll turn off the water feature, HVAC, lights, everything. That really helped kind of eliminate that list of things that they had to typically do in the past and made it a lot easier for them.
Awesome. Yeah. So is this running Crestron Home or is it running is it running like a custom program?
It's a combination programming of Simple and D3 rather, sorry.
D3. Okay. Yeah, because I know with Crestron Home, you can achieve that with quick action. So that's kind of what it sounded like it was, but I wanted to ask. So yeah, we can still accomplish that, obviously through custom programming as well.
Yeah.
So that's such a huge value. I love that feature. I have similar on my Crestron Home system, just turn everything off, especially when you have kids who leave everything on. So John, you just touched upon it a little bit more, I believe, when you're talking about maybe some of that safety checklist, and we touched upon it at the top of this podcast. But we talked about the 3-story structure, right, which is incredible. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about how that's accomplished?
So the 3 stories, there are 8 lifts that raise the roof, so to speak, on this structure. So everything goes up on the second floor. Basically, the walls are tiered in a section, that gets progressively smaller. And as things are going up, there's electrical, there's plumbing. Believe it or not, on the second floor, there is a primary bathroom and a primary bedroom. And in that primary bathroom, there is a stand-up shower. So when the coach RV is deployed, it's parked. That shower is roughly 6.5 feet in height. When it's lowered to go back on the road, it goes down to about 40 inches. So you think of the differential between there, and then you start to think about, well, there's hot and cold water pipes that have to go up and down on that trajectory. And it's the engineering that went into the project. Even we were blown away by some of the collaboration that happened.
Yeah, you're talking about going from like 3.5 feet to 6.5 feet for the shower, which is pretty incredible to imagine.
Yeah, and it happens in under a minute.
Wow. So that actually leads me into one of my follow-up questions here. So how is that actually done in terms of the automation component of the 3-story feature? Is that physically done through a touchscreen? Is there a scene set for that, or is that some type of manual way to do that?
So that was done previously by Anderson, because they've been doing this for a very long time. They had a system which they used to actually control and synchronize all the different lifts and whatnot.
Okay.
So they have a panel that you actually have to, the drivers, it's not really the thing you can obviously press and walk away with. You have to listen to the sounds it's making. You have to, keep an eye out, make sure everything is functioning properly. But there's really just a panel that you can manually control the lifts with. And it's all done through that. We want to integrate it into Crestron in the next project. But we have to get there.
Yeah, we'll see if we can come up with some drivers or extensions in Crestron Home to be able to integrate that with. But that sounds really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, you just touched upon it a little bit with the bathrooms. There's a lot of luxury features, it seems like, and you're balancing that luxury and comfort. So it has bathrooms, obviously running water. It also has a fireplace. Can you tell us a little bit more about these features?
So in the living room, when you go on, there's a lateral side door, which incidentally Crestron is controlling as well. Once you're in through the side door, if you go to the left, we have the kitchen, living room, where the owner sits and hangs out with friends, twin 75-inch screens on a sort of 45-degree angle, where he can watch anything he wants.
Wow.
And at the end, between those two 75-inch screens, there's a waterfall, and it's backlit using RGB lighting controlled by Crestron, the DIN 2 LED PWM8s, and those work flawlessly in terms of displaying the 16.7 million different color options. So we basically, on the touchscreens, just basically have a little, chromaticity diagram, and they can dial in whatever XY color plots they want.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun. The family loves it. The owners love it, and they were really stoked when we showed it to them because they weren't anticipating that level of granular control. So the waterfall in the middle. If you go upstairs to the primary bedroom, we have 3 screens, 2 cuddle TVs, as we affectionately call them, where traditionally you would have his and her bedside tables. Opposite the headboard, we have a 55-inch flat panel. Underneath that, we have something unique. We wanted to create some ambience, and fireplaces often create ambience, but a fireplace on an RV just is not practical, nor do we have the provisions to vent any of that smoke and, toxic gases. So we came up with a mist fireplace, which basically looks like a fireplace, has a snap, crackle, and pop with a little audio track that plays from the fireplace, but without any of the gas and without the need to stoke and feed it with wood. So the mist fireplace is fed with water, and the water vapor is the byproduct. But it actually looks like sort of flames flickering and dancing just on the top of this surface.
Yeah, and brings you peace of mind of not worrying about emitting the carbon monoxide or the gas, all the stuff that all the bad stuff that comes with the fireplace, right?
We're not going to burn the coach down. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, $6.5 million, right? So. So, John, you talked about it a little bit earlier, briefly, power management. That's obviously critical in high-tech environments like this. So how exactly is the power handled and conditioned aboard this vehicle?
So everything is, when the coach is parked, it's on what we call shore power, which is basically just a external power supply for the entire coach. When it is on the road, it gets powered by a series of batteries underneath. So all of the mission critical, the network, the fridges, our system, the Cradle Point, all gets powered. And it's all filtered through a series of UPS backups and power filtering, which, is standard because you can never really bank on clean power. Everybody says their power is great until it's not.
Right.
So you don't want to find out the hard way. Yeah. Exactly.
So understanding operational modes is key for both safety and convenience. And you guys had talked about this a little bit when you were talking about the checklist per se. So what functions are off when the RV is being towed/driven, brought to from point A to point B versus those when it's stationary and, fully operational?
So basically, to save power from the batteries, when the trailer is being towed, there's kind of a transfer switch that switches to essential loads only. So basically, that would be things like refrigerator,
Right.
network, some of the basic controls so the driver can get in and control some of the automation features. But really, it eliminates power to most of the lighting areas, appliances, TVs, audio stuff, and entertainment stuff. It's really just the essentials when it's being
Right.
just to kind of keep the food in the fridge cold and ensure that we have 24/7 connectivity.
Right. Conceptually, it's kind of similar to, a backup generator in a house where
Exactly.
depending on your power loads, only the essential breakers come back on that you have tied into.
Precisely.
So that makes sense. So remote diagnostics and support can make all the difference for uptime and reliability. So what systems are in place to service the vehicle remotely?
Yeah, so that's a great question, actually. So we have a triple redundant network. So John kept mentioning the Cradlepoint. Our network guy, Simone, great. He was able to set it up. It's basically we have we can access 2 cell networks in the U.S. I think AT&T and Verizon.
Yeah, 5G.
Exactly. If those do not work, the network falls back to Starlink. So
Okay.
we have a couple different options. It's all configured to happen automatically, no matter where they are. If the network speed drops below a certain threshold, it'll automatically switch over. Or if it can't get anything at all, it'll switch over. And that kind of allows us to have 24/7 connectivity. We also have through Cradlepoint, there's some remote management. Through Unify, which we're using for some network equipment, we also have remote management there. And I think that covers the remote management. Yeah.
Awesome. So how did this come about in terms of the first performance, right? Real world performance is always the ultimate test. So how did this go about? Was there a first initial launch and road test of this with everything fully functioning, or how did that work?
There was, yeah. Once we commissioned the system and everything, passed with flying colors, they took it on a road test, drove it up to a ski hill. It was in the summertime. They drove it up to a ski hill. They got some really interesting looks from people, when they stopped to fill up for gas, and people have no idea where does this behemoth come from.
Right.
It's almost have a big classified sticker on the side.
Looks like a spaceship.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So after the road test, we went back and checked everything, and everything was exactly the way it was prior to the road test. So we're not known for our wonderful homogeneous roads here in Quebec. So there were a lot of potholes, and it hit a couple of speed bumps, but it passed with flying colors.
We figured if it can make it out of Quebec, okay, it's probably going to be fine anywhere else.
Yeah.
Worst case driving conditions for the test makes the most sense.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that goes back to, what we talked about before with the cabling and everything. So you double checked all that, which makes sense. So, that's the ultimate test right there. So we know that a lot of times that innovation in one area often sparks ideas for others. And I know this was a very unique project in itself, but has this project given you guys any ideas for residential solutions in the traditional stationary home?
I think through the processes, we sort of, figured out how we can be more efficient in terms of using certain resources. And it's given us some ideas in terms of how to automate things for moving elements, moving forward, pardon the pun. But we haven't, we're looking forward to the next RV, and there's so much that we learned from this original go around that I think next time we can push the envelope a little more and potentially create some even cooler stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as things always evolve and advance, there's always room for new features and stuff, which is really cool and exciting. Well, John, Cameron, thank you guys so much for taking the time for joining us on the Smarter Spaces podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Pleasure for having us.
Yes, thank you guys again so much for joining. So everyone, that's a wrap on this episode of the Smarter Spaces podcast. Again, huge thanks to the both of you for taking us behind the scenes on the world's largest RV and sharing what it takes to bring the smart home technology to such an ambitious project. Audience, if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe to us on all social media platforms, and we'll be back with more stories from the cutting edge of technology integration. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.